What's up, statue dudes? So a couple weeks ago, Kendall talked about making his guitar talk, and so in continuing with the theme of things doing things that you don't normally think about them doing, I'm going to talk about playing melodies on drums. I don't mean like literally setting up a bunch of drums and tuning them to specific pitches and playing a melody on that. I mean, the pitch of the drums does have a little bit to do with what I'm talking about, but I mean something a little bit more abstract. Maybe a better way to put it might be how drums can be melodic. I'm gonna do this by talking about my favorite drum solo of all time. It's called For Big Sid, and it's by Max Roach. So before we get into it, if you like the video, be sure to chisel that like button and subscribe to the channel. We post a new video every Saturday. And also, if you haven't met our friend here, this is Dead Fred. He's the real backbone of the band. But yeah, when we get to 200 subscribers, we're gonna get him some new cowboy swag. Last time we got him this bandolier and he's got some spurs. And we've actually been getting a lot of suggestions from you guys about what you want to see on him next. So when we get to 200 subscribers, we're gonna get him some Moss cowboy swag. Alright, so let me give you just a little bit of the history on the solo. It was written and recorded by Max Roach on his 1966 album, Drums Unlimited. It was written to be a tribute to Big Sid Catlett, a drummer who was active in like the 30s and 40s, who was obviously one of Max Roach's big influences. I actually recorded my own version. You may have already seen it, you may not, but I did that as a tribute to Max since, you know, like I said, this is my favorite drum solo and he's one of my favorite drummers. The link to my version will be in the description, and there will also be a link at the end of the video during like the end screen. I'm going to talk a little bit more about my version at the end. I actually learned the first part of this solo years ago, but I didn't get very far and I kind of just gave up on it. So it was kind of a years-long journey to finally learn all of it, and you know, it felt really good to overcome that challenge, you know, since I gave up on it, you know, years ago. Just listening to the solo, I could always tell that it was very melodic, but learning the solo really made me appreciate that even more. Alright, so why is this solo melodic? What do I even mean when I'm talking about drums being melodic? So I think the easiest way to kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about is the opening lick. It's literally a 4-note melody because you have the snare drum, high tom, floor tom, and kick drum. So 4 surfaces. Technically, there's 4 different pitches there. So it's like a 4-note melody. Actually, to demonstrate that even more, I'm gonna show you what it would sound like if you played it on a saxophone. All right, so what we're gonna do is assign each one of those 4 drums a pitch. We're gonna pick the G minor scale because that has that jazzy feel. So we're gonna start with the snare, and we're gonna pick B flat. Then for the high tom, we're gonna pick C because it's a little bit higher than the snare. For the floor tom, we're gonna pick A because it's a little bit lower than the snare. And then for the kick drum, we're gonna pick G because that's the lowest note and it's also the root of the scale. Now that we got all the drums assigned to a pitch, let's hear what the melody will sound like. So there you can see, you know, if you take those 4 notes and put them on an instrument that you would normally think of as being melodic, it actually sounds like a pretty nice melody. Beyond that, maybe a little bit more abstractly, it's not just a beat. It's not a bunch of fast notes. It's organized a lot more like a line that you would hear played on a pitched instrument or like a melodic instrument. And just like a really catchy melody, it can get stuck in your head. Also, pitched instruments, when they're playing a solo, usually play off of the melody. So you'll either hear little snippets of that main melody kind of throughout the solo, or you'll hear variations on those little snippets, or sometimes they just play the melody with little embellishments or flourishes added to it. And so actually we hear all of that in this drum solo. So for example, the 4-stroke lick that starts off the solo, Beladum, that thing is all throughout the solo. and you hear several different variations on it. Just like I was talking about how a pitched instrument might take a piece of the melody and do variations on it. So obviously you have the downward version, and then you also have an upward version. So a lot of times you'll hear those back to back. Later on, that 4-note phrase is turned into a 6-note phrase. And after that, that 6-note phrase becomes an even longer phrase. So those are all different variations on that beginning 4-note lick. Another great example is at the end of the opening melody, you hear the 2 beats on the kick drum. Boom, boom. That is used really creatively throughout the whole solo. So obviously at the beginning of the solo, it's used at the end of the phrase. But then a little bit later on, it's used at the beginning of the phrase. Then immediately after that, it begins the phrase again, but it's played on floor tom and snare. A little bit later on in the solo, there's even a part where instead of being on the kick, it's played on the cymbal, which is like, to me, it's really creative because, you know, a cymbal's kind of like the opposite of a kick. So that's some of the ways that the main melody is alluded to throughout the solo. I could break down this solo endlessly, but I think that's a pretty good demonstration of why this solo specifically is melodic and how drums in general can be used melodically. Hopefully now if you go listen to my version or even the original version, you'll be able to hear some of those parts that I talked about and see how they fit into the greater whole. Speaking of my version of the solo, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I approached it. If you know Marble Statues, you know that electronic music is a big part of what we do. I was originally thinking about playing the whole solo on an electronic kit, but then I started practicing it on my acoustic kit, and it just felt so good, and especially because it is kind of an older, you know, jazzy solo, I really like the way that the acoustic kit sounds. So I asked everyone that was on our live stream, Sunday Funday Live, a couple weeks ago, whether they wanted to hear it on the electric or on the acoustic, because I was really torn. And of course, they said both, which was a really awesome idea, and it really inspired me to do something I think that was pretty cool for this solo. I ended up recording on an acoustic kit with 2 mics left and right, so it's like your left and right ears. The idea is that you're kind of sitting in front of the kit. It's a smaller kit, which is a little bit more jazzy, so I kind of wanted to keep that jazzy vibe. And then I set up triggers on the toms and the kick, so I could layer in some electric sounds on those. For the toms, I took some inspiration from an old Van Halen drum solo. I had a DVD of a Van Halen concert, and Alex played this really awesome drum solo on it, and I always really liked the way those toms sounded. I'm also a big fan of sound effects on drums, you know, especially because you don't hear it that much. So I found a cool delay that had an electric vibe to it. Besides that, I'm also a huge fan of dynamics, so I added some in, you know, getting louder or getting quieter based on where I thought it fit the music. Obviously, since it was a tribute, I wanted to honor Max's work on the solo. I wanted to add a little bit of my own personality in as well. So that was just some of the ways that I did that. So anyways, thanks for letting me share some about my favorite drum solo with you guys. And hopefully next time you listen to a drum solo, it'll give you something to think about, and maybe you can hear some melodies in that solo as well. So that about wraps it up. Remember, if you liked the video, chisel that like button. And subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're going to get Dead Fred some more cowboy swag when we hit 200 subscribers. And yeah, we'll see you back here next Saturday for another video. So yeah, to watch my version of Blues for Big Sid, on the end screen there will be a link on the screen that you can click on. It'll take you right to it. Or if you just check the description down below, there will be a link there. But yeah, thanks guys for watching. Peace out.